Hey mums and dads, do you dream of world schooling your kids but you're worried about how it may negatively affect their futures? Today we're talking about just that, so watch this to find out more. So you've heard about world schooling and you like the idea. You're excited at the possibility of travelling the world with your kids, but what about their futures? Could taking them out of school have a negative impact on them? Hey mums and dads, I'm Karen King, creator of Worldschooling Central, where we teach parents just like you about world schooling. If you want more out of life and you want to create an incredible lifestyle for you and your family, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit the big red subscribe button and download our free world schooling guide using the links down below. Right now you have a whole lot of questions because in 2015 I had exactly the same questions. Now I could just give you my opinion, but instead I want to introduce you to someone who will actually show you what sort of impact world schooling can have. Today I want to introduce you to Reka Kaponay, an Aussie teen who has been travelling the world full time with her parents since 2011. Reka began school back in Australia and was part of the school system until completing grade 2, at which time she and her parents headed out on an amazing world schooling adventure. Today, Reka has been to 52 different countries. She's experienced more than most people do in a lifetime, and despite her young age, world schooling opened up opportunities that allowed Reka to publish her very first novel at just 12 years of age. This was followed by an international book tour and an invitation to publish her book in another language. In today's interview, Reka gives us an opportunity to hear firsthand how world schooling and breaking away from a traditional school system has impacted her life. This is one interview that you want to watch from start to finish. Let's meet Reka now.
Hi, my name is Reka Kaponay. I'm 18 years old and I've been traveling with my parents and twin brother on a school of life journey for the last 8 years.
So Reka, what is world schooling?
I think for me, world schooling is the pursuit of what you truly love and the world being there as your sort of this launching pad that will send, being able to really send you off shooting through the stars in a sense.
And when did you guys discover world schooling?
My mum tells the story this way, that she was taking us to school and it was like this really crazy, stressful morning and the weather was terrible. And she sort of had an epiphany of like, why is she doing this? Why is she rushing to take us, to other people who will teach us, when she sort of felt like as parents, it's their responsibility to be teaching their kids. So we did grade 1 and grade 2. And it was at the end of grade 2 when we were taken out of school. Before we even started traveling internationally, we decided to do a road trip around Australia. And before we even sort of knew what world schooling was, we were sort of doing it in the sense that we were traveling in the car, road tripping, and we would just be learning from the people that we met and, the cultures that we were experiencing. It was really, really powerful. So I think from that, it's really grown in the sense that we realize that the world has so much to teach us and that there's so much to learn. And I think that's probably where it started.
And how did you feel when your parents took you out of school?
I think it was sort of interesting because we weren't at a point where we're like, oh my God, yes, school is terrible, so we're so excited to leave it. But we also weren't at a point where we weren't excited by that fact. So it was a mix. I'd had some unfortunate sort of experiences in grade 2, so I hadn't enjoyed it very much. So I was probably more excited about leaving than my brother. But yeah, no, it was exciting because it was something that was unknown, and that excited my brother and I.
So Reka, where have you been on your world schooling adventure?
We've been to 52 countries now, so quite a few places, but I loved Scotland and England because I am a history freak, especially medieval history. And so I loved visiting like castles and forts and all these ancient places that are so well preserved in Europe. And, and they have so many stories to tell in a sense. And so, yeah, for me, I always love places like that. So we went to the States when we first started traveling, and then spent 6 months going around in an RV. And then we drove to Miami, and we left our RV there with some friends, and we took just some backpacks and went for 6 months backpacking throughout South America. And I think my brother and I we were just 11 at the time. And and that was the very first time where I really just remember being, out of my comfort zone, in a sense that this was no longer like first world countries, and just that experience has always stuck with me. We got to go up to live with the living descendants of the Incas, basically. And and so that was at like nearly 5,000 meters in the Andes Mountains. And we spent a week living up there with the locals in a village, all out of these bluestone huts, and no other foreigner had gone there except for a Japanese National Geographic photographer. So that experience has always really stuck with me, like making pancakes for the village and getting invited to sort of witness like a church ceremony that they had, and then getting to go to their school and bring them school supplies, and then we did this incredible 16-kilometer hike over the mountains and like over these raging rivers, and the locals there, they're just in these tiny little sandals, and they're just like hopping over this raging waterfall, and we're just like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? And then they just showed us, no, you step here, you step there, and then you're over the waterfall. And so that's something that I always remember as being quite an adventurous sort of part of our travels.
And what was life like growing up as a world schooling kid?
I think when I first started out, I think just the unknown of certain things can sometimes be a bit scary. Especially, I think that the first time I really experienced that was South America. I think that was the first time I got a bit of a glimpse that, maybe my parents don't know everything, and maybe they're figuring out stuff as they go as well. My parents also really included my brother and I in all sorts of conversations about finances, about our sort of monetary situation, and sort of also knowing at times when we might have not been in a great financial situation, and, those sorts of things, they definitely played into some of the challenges we faced together. But I think if anything, I'm so grateful that they did include us, because I've learned so much from that, and to be able to know that you have an equal stake in your family and that you're just as important family member as, your parents is, it's great. And so, those were probably some of the challenges, like just knowing the truth of situations at a younger age, and having to deal with that and learn with that and grow in that sense. It was definitely tough at times, but I would say it was for the best. And I know friends of mine who really have no idea what their family situation is like. And, there's it just different, like they're like, oh, I want an iPad for Christmas, and I want this and that and the other, and like they really have no idea what it takes for their parents to be able to provide them that. And I think that's really important for any child to know. That was probably a challenge, but it was something I'm really grateful for.
And how would you describe the difference between traditional schooling and world schooling?
With school, obviously there's like, you're told what you're going to be learning, and there's sort of no deviation to that. In homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling, whatever you end up, whatever avenue that is that you choose, or whatever that looks like, I think there's an inherent form of freedom in the fact that you learn, what really interests you, and what you really feel a connection to. So that's honestly, like, when we started traveling, we needed sort of Wi-Fi to be able to do our work, and we were in the States. That was where we started, and we had an RV, and we drove around the States, and we would go to libraries all over the States and just hang out for a day at a library. My parents would use their Wi-Fi to work, and I would sit down with 2 400-page books and read them over the course of the day. So that's, that was something that really struck me, especially coming out of the school environment and going to like unschooling or world schooling, whatever it was that in school, that was what I wished I could do, is just sit down and read all day. And now I was able to do that. So it was really, I think that's the difference, is that you really just have the choice to learn what really interests you and be able to pursue that no matter how deep you want to go with it. And I mean, that's what led me to write my book. And, pursue that passion. So I'm really grateful that I got to experience school, to be able to see the sort of vast chasm of difference that lies between the two.
So tell me more about how world schooling kids learn.
We started with this curriculum, and I think that lasted like a week. So we literally printed it out, and it was like math at this time and science later in the day. And, we even bought a whiteboard. So we had this whiteboard in our dining room, and it was going to be like school time. And yeah, that lasted a week. So it really became another really interesting conversation that we had with our parents. Is they sat us down and they were like, okay, what is it that you would like to learn? And that was really powerful, because not only did they really try and like make us feel a part of that conversation, but they listened. And so it sort of became a journey of sort of following our passions, and in like going deeper into what interested us. Like I loved to read. I still, obviously, that's my life. And so I was living at the library basically every day. We'd go to the library and pick out new books and bring them back and then read them together as a family. And then we did online things for maths and different stuff like that, but it was games and things that really interested us and intrigued us. And same thing as we started going on, well, we always loved to walk, but we started going on even longer hikes. And it was during those hikes and walks that we really began to discuss things and go deeper in conversation and learn from each other, and talk about history, which is one of my favorite subjects to learn about. So it was very sort of organic in that sense, the way we started to learn. Something that I think I would say to any parent who's thinking of how they're going to educate their kids or how they're going to learn on the road is just allow a bit of time for those kids to find their feet, because they will, and it's going to be amazing what they do.
And what about the basics like math and science?
Absolutely find all of those things online. Especially, it's amazing, honestly, what there is available to kids and everyone online. So many different ways. And, that's something that, I obviously, you should know some maths, and you should know, it's an important subject. But I think if you're not planning on being, an astronaut or, a really, an engineer in a sense, perhaps it's not so important to put kids through the stresses of learning, so many different iterations of maths in that sense. If it's your passion, then go ahead, please learn everything that to do about that. And you can, again, online. And even not just online, you can find so many different outlets while on the road, different groups, different sort of institutes that you can visit. It's amazing. But yeah, it's not so closed-minded in a sense, what your options are on the road.
What sort of impact has following your interest had on the way you learn?
I think it's really, honestly, it's broadened my horizons in a lot of different ways, because in school, yes, unfortunately, this love of learning that kids start with can sort of be killed out in the sense of, they're not being able to really pursue stuff that really interests them in a sense and in a way that they would like. And I think world schooling and unschooling was really able to sort of nurture that natural curiosity that my brother and I had. And I think that's something that's just, we're more flexible, we're more open to things. I feel like with, I don't know, just with some of our friends that we have, it's interesting to see the different perspectives that we have growing, having experienced different forms of learning. And, unfortunately here in Australia, our counterparts can sometimes be a little bit more sort of closed off or because, isolated, just because they haven't really known anything outside of the environment they were raised in. And so I'm really grateful for the chance that I had to be able to learn and see those different aspects of the world, because they've only enriched me. Obviously, for everyone, it's going to work differently. There's no one size fits all for homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling. But I think what really made a difference for us was that my parents really trusted my brother and I. They sort of allowed us to really find what was going to work for us in our learning, and whether that was doing some online stuff, whether that was going to museums and castles and learning from in the moment as we traveled, whether it was, you know, talking to other people and, you know, learning from their life experience and other things, and, you know, having teachers in the forms of so many different people that we met along, you know, our travels. I think whatever it was, they were able to trust us in that sense, and they weren't ever, or maybe they were, but I don't know if they never showed that worry of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to them? They're not going to be able to, you know, be successful citizens in the world. And I think, if anything, they really they gave us the key to a sort of treasure chest, in the sense of really being able to grow into who we are as humans, as people, as what we can contribute to society. And I think that's something that that I think I would say to any parent who's thinking of how they're going to educate their kids or how they're going to learn on the road.
Reka, is it hard for world schooling kids to socialise?
If anything, I usually say that kids that are homeschooled or unschooled or world schooled, because they're not forced into sort of an environment of forced socialization every day, they have to make more of an effort, in a sense. And if anything, that makes them more social than kids in school. So I feel like it's really not a challenge unless you, or it's not a problem unless you try and make it one, because there are people everywhere that you can, you know, become friends with. There are groups you can join. There are, you know, activities you can do if you're really sort of worried about those sorts of things. But what I really loved about the fact that I was no longer confined to a single grade was that I could now make friends that were older than me, that were younger than me. I know friends of mine that unfortunately don't even know the kids in the grade below them because, oh, they're one grade below me, so why would I socialize with them? So it's something that I've really treasured, is that aspect of being able to forge friendships with, you know, like people who are 20 years older than me, and then people who are like 5 years younger. And I can have just a special connection with them too.
Have you ever missed going to school?
No, I have not. It's no, I think especially because it was, we had friends outside of school as well, and we were able to make more connections once we left the school sphere as well, through homeschooling groups, or you know, even when we started traveling, just, you know, randomly, even in like RV parks, or, you know, in the supermarket, or just, you know, randomly these connections that we were able to make, and they sort of sustained that social aspect of school. And so I never really missed the whole schooling aspect of things.
And is world schooling still possible as a teenager?
Yeah, I've definitely met people who've had that concern. Again, it's not a one size fits all. Some kids, like I've known, I have some friends who wanted to go back to high school, and their parents were like, sure, go ahead. And then they went back for like a week, and they were like, oh my God, get me out of here. So I think it really is, you know, when your kids have that sort of dilemma, or if you have that dilemma, I'm not sure if it's the parents who want the kids to go back, or if the kids themselves want to, whatever it is, it's good to sort of then experience it. Like, you know, instead of sort of fighting against that, I would say, sure, let them go back and see what it's like, and then, you know, let them evolve from there. I don't think as a parent you should worry about having to send your kids back to high school. I wouldn't, but yeah.
Can world schooling kids still go to college or university?
It's really interesting. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like the world itself, and being world school, being out in you know, learning the way I did, I feel like that taught me so much more than what, you know, maybe what high school could have. And I think if anything, it prepared me a lot more for sort of real life, because in a sense I've been living in the real world since I was 10, because I'm no longer in that sort of environment of isolation. I think that's something that I know a lot of my friends have struggled with, is coming out of high school and then being like, oh gosh, you know, I you know, now there's uni, or, you know, what do I do? Like, I'm not actually. It's interesting to see. The world has changed so much, in the sense that universities aren't looking exactly for sort of a one-size-fits-all type of student anymore. And I think world schoolers or homeschoolers have quite an advantage in the sense that they can come to colleges and universities, and if they can show what they've done, they bring sort of, you can document what you've done and that sort of stuff. And I could go and be like, hey, I've written a book and done this and spoken at a few TEDx's, and my brother, he's started a business. And, that counts in quite a few universities towards credit of entry. So I think, yeah, it doesn't have to be, it's not as challenging as people would make it out. I think if you really put your mind to it, it's not very hard to be able to get accepted in that sense, because if you're able to show what you've done, and yeah, that's something, I mean, universities are looking for people who are going to be, they're going to be sort of flexible. They have life experience in a sense. They want people who are going to be committed and have, flexibility in the way they think, the way they act. And I think, if anything, homeschoolers and world schoolers are really well equipped for that.
Do you ever get lonely while you're traveling?
I think it's inevitable. I think loneliness is a part of travel that comes along, but it's interesting in the sense that it doesn't have to be so, like, loneliness can take on, I don't know, it doesn't have to be something that's scary in a sense. Like, there's a difference between loneliness and aloneness, I would say. And I think, just knowing where to find that balance between community and then sort of a bit of isolation, in the sense that, it's just you and your family maybe, which, is your own community in a sense. But, I think, it doesn't have to be something that's so frightening. Like, I'm a bit different in my brother in the sense that whenever we were by ourselves, or just the four of us traveling, like, I was never bothered by the fact that there weren't other people around. Maybe at some points I didn't get very lonely in the sense. My brother was different. He needed different social connections, differently, like to charge up in that sense. And we were able to, make certain decisions to travel to certain places where there'd be more, people, friends. So it's always, a thing that you can really face together as a family. But yeah, I think it's something that probably will come with the travel. There will be times when you're lonely, or your kids are lonely, or they miss certain friends or certain family members. And I think it's just taking each moment as it comes and being grateful for the moments when you are with friends. And, I think that's something that my brother and I really learned was just to value each and every moment with friends, like going to the movies or having a sleepover, because it didn't happen as often. It was something that we really valued more than some other friends that have it all the time. And so yeah.
Do you miss having a home and your own things?
We walked the Camino, which, you have to carry everything you own on your back for however many days. And when you're walking, 20, 25, 30 kilometers a day, you really realize what you really need in life, and how little you actually really need in terms of materialistic items. And yeah, so it's the same with us. I mean, for the last couple of years, we've been traveling, just, we've always tried to travel just carry on only. When we first started traveling, we were so bad at that. We had like 3 extra suitcases and like 4 extra backpacks. And there's a photo of us somewhere in like Colombia at the very beginning of our South America journeys, and it's just terrible to look at just how much we had. And yeah, and that's that's been a journey as well, letting go of things and realizing we don't really need that much.
And how has world schooling changed your relationship with your family?
It's brought us so much closer, honestly. I think we were always a close family, but if anything, this has brought us so much closer together. And I mean, like, my brother's my best friend, and I love sharing, all the, like, my experiences with my parents and things. I mean, when I'm writing, I sort of have a connection with my dad in that sense, because he's also sort of a writer. And so whenever I wrote a chapter of my book, I remember he was the first one I ran to like tell and read, and, oh my God, what do you think? And my mum as well, she's amazing with like grammar and punctuation. So she was always like really helpful and there for me. And I think that's something, outside of writing, is that we've really cultivated that closeness, especially because like the first 6 months of our travels were in this tiny RV, living in this space together. And yeah, that was something that it never bothered me in that sense. I always loved that we were so close, and, not just physically, but, as a family connection.
Okay, so the question that everybody wants answered, how does a 12-year-old write and publish a novel?
I've always loved to write. That was always, reading and writing was my two biggest passions. And when we started traveling, I started sending all these emails, like these long emails back to friends and family, like, you know, telling them where we were and what we were doing. And they were essentially blogs before they were blogs. And I sort of feel sorry for anyone who was on that list now of emails, because they were so long and filled with so many photos that I don't know how, the email even sent through. But yeah, it got to a point where my parents were like, you're spending a lot of time writing individually to everyone. Why don't you just sort of create a place where everyone can come and just read the stories? And that was how sort of my blog was born, which was Dreamtime Traveler. And from that, it was really interesting how I was able to sort of, because I'd always, before we started traveling, I'd always written sort of creative writing and fantasy sort of little stories. And now I was sort of exploring the part of writing nonfiction, in the sense that I was writing our stories. And I almost didn't even write any sort of creative stuff until one experience. We were in Morocco at in the high Atlas Mountains, and one very close friend of ours, who we'd actually at that point only ever met before via Skype, was like, oh, I'm right across the sea, just like a ferry ride from you in Spain. Why don't you come visit? And we were like, you know what, why not? Yeah. So we went across and got to visit him, and it was in Andalusia, where he lived in Spain. And honestly, for me, it was just like the most magical experience, because he had this dog called Fuko, and it was as if, I kid you not, it was as if this dog had its own life. It was, going off wherever it wanted to go, and, coming back at, crazy hours of the night. And, my my 10-year-old imagination at that time was like, oh my gosh, what if, this dog, the reason why he's doing all this is because he's actually the guardian of this valley, and he has this immense power to protect it, and keep the balance between the forces of the earth and the dream, which is this mystical land that holds the key to the origins of all stories. And that was actually my experience in the Aboriginal land, sort of filtering through. And so when we left Spain after 3 days, I had this idea for this story that I just could not put down. And on the ferry ride back, I already started writing it. And it evolved into what is today Dawn of the Guardian, which is my debut fantasy fiction adventure novel. But yeah, at the time I was actually 12, I remember. And yeah, just crazily, our next stop was Budapest in Hungary, and I spent 9 months writing this story, which I had no idea what it was going to be, if I wanted it to be a book or not. But yeah, 9 months writing it every day for like 10 hours. And then, yeah, at the end, I was left with this sort of 400-page novel, and my parents were like, oh, what do you want to do with this now? And yeah, I left it for a little while, let it sit. And we walked the Camino, which in Spain is like this 800-kilometer walk along the coast. Well, we did the Norte route, which is along the coast. And it was during that I realized, okay, yeah, this was a first draft. I want to go back. I want to sort of make it into a story that I would love to read, because I've always loved fantasy adventure fiction, and that was something that I really wanted to create, a story that I would be happy to read. And so I went back and re-edited it. It took me about 4 months, and just a few weeks before I was 14. We returned to Australia, first time in 4 years. And at 14, I published the book with my parents, and my godmother was she's this incredible graphic designer, illustrator. So she did all the illustrations for the book. We spent, another 6 months just working on it. We self-published it because I had received this offer of publication, but it was from this really great publishing house, and they said, we love your book, we'll publish it, but just because of where we are at the moment, you're going to have to do all the marketing. And at that point, my parents and I thought, well, if we have to do all the marketing, which is a really sort of integral part of releasing a book into the world, we might as well publish it ourselves. And so that's sort of another whole journey we embarked upon of becoming publishers, self-publishers. And so we launched the book here in Melbourne. nearly 4 years ago now, and that was the beginning. And we then embarked on this 18-month book tour, which took us all around the States and Canada, England, Scotland, Mexico, and then all the way to Hungary, actually, which is where the book was published in Hungarian. It was translated and published by the largest publishing company there, who also have like this huge bookstore chain. So they were able to distribute it, which was really, really incredible. For me. And then it's the beginning of a trilogy. So I'm in the process of nearly finished the second one. The third one will be, along the way. So yeah, that's sort of been my sort of writing journey over the last 4 years.
Do you think Worldschooling contributed to you becoming an author?
First off, I really don't think I'd be where I am today without Worldschooling. I mean, I'm sure I would have pursued my passion of writing should I have stayed here, but yeah, I doubt I'd have Dawn of the Guardian, obviously, because of that, it was born throughout our travels. And if anything, that's been such a big part of who I've grown to be, because it's been the catalyst for so many of my learning, of where I've gone, of how my writing has evolved, of, learning from other people that we've met along our travels and listening to their stories, and then sharing some of our own. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world.
So Reka, what's next in your Worldschooling adventures?
Well, we've got a few different things going on now. I'm nearly finished with my second book. So, this year especially, I'm giving all my attention to sort of finishing the trilogy in the sense of Dawn of the Guardian, and then seeing where that leads in terms of publication. I think we're actually feeling, all four of us, that this could be a year for a bit of sort of like a rebuild year in terms of projects, a growth year, and we're okay if we're going to be in one spot for a little bit longer. That's something that might happen, and we're enjoying, because we've just spent a bit of time in Sydney as well, which is a place that my brother and I never really spent time in, from Melbourne. And I mean, my dad's from there, and we went up and lived in Sydney for 3 months, and my brother and I became like surf lifesavers at Bondi Beach, and so getting sort of forging a community up there as well. And yeah, we're enjoying being here for a little bit.
And for anyone that wants to find out more, where do we find you online?
The easiest place to find it is Amazon. You can get it in Kindle form, iBooks, but also obviously paperback. So you can find it there. And also through my website, which is dawnoftheguardian.com. And yeah, if you want to hear more about our travels, stories like that, you can go to dreamtimetraveler.com, which is my travel blog and sort of our family chronicler at the moment. And I post quite frequently on Instagram, so you'll have probably more updates there. And yeah, Facebook, all those places, just Reka Kaponay or Dreamtime Traveler, you'll find me.
And finally, to a mum or dad out there who's considering worldschooling, as a worldschooling teen, what is your advice?
Don't worry so much. I would say just allow that time, a little bit of buffer time for breathing for the kids, especially if they're coming out of school. Let them discover what they're really passionate about, because they will. And don't worry about how they're going to achieve certain things or what's going to happen, because everything honestly works out. And you're giving them such a gift in showing them the world and giving them the world, and they're going to be, and maybe not at the time, but they're going to really realize how much of a gift that really is. And it's going to impact them in so many different amazing ways, some challenging ways, but it's going to make them, grow into someone that's so much more sure of themselves and confident in who they are and curious about the world and, always wanting to learn more. And so I would say, go ahead and you'll do fine. Worldschooling is just endless opportunity.
To find out more about Reka and to grab a copy of her book, check out the links below this video. If you enjoyed hearing from this amazing Worldschooling team, give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Finally, to get more information about Worldschooling, visit our website at www.worldschoolingcentral.com.